We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AV Rant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And AV Rant kind of, we didn't celebrate it all, but there was an occasion to mark, but I won't spoil it because Tom's been the one here since the beginning. It's his podcast that he started, so he can make the announcement. What did you discover that April 2nd was?
Yeah, so my wife actually said, she was on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn told her that it was my 15-year anniversary of becoming the host of AV Rant. I'm like,
nice.
Really? Is that the right day? I don't think that's the right day. But anyways, that's what LinkedIn says, and who am I to argue? So 15 years of this podcast.
15 years of AV Rant.
That's right. So it started way back in whatever that was.
Pretty monumental.
6, 7. Yeah. So there we are.
And
it's all thanks to our listeners who keep us going. Of course, Rob for filling in after Tom burned through 2 other co-hosts. So we'll see how long Rob lasts. Well, only through line is that I haven't been up yet.
Okay,
I haven't. That's it.
Well, it's fitting here. Yeah, your camera turned off and went to a different camera.
And we're going to fix that. And
because whatever was going on last week, it's on Tom's end. Now I'm just, in case you notice that the YouTube video looks a little bit different this week, if you happen to be watching it, I am no longer using the whole importing of Skype into OBS. I'm just capturing the screen. So exactly what is coming through Skype, that's what we're seeing now. Hopefully that helps with the lip sync, but not if we have video glitches on Tom's end. So there we go. Anyway,
did that fix it?
It looks all right. You're back to your regular camera.
Okay.
You're centered. You're there.
I don't know. I don't know. This is a new computer, so we can't blame the computer. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah. It's not the old Mac anymore. So
no. All right. So 15 years. Yeah. Let's get the podcast started because I don't think I want to go all the way to 2:30, but we will see. I don't know how long. It looks like a lot of questions. All right. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast. YouTube.com/AVRant. Contact Rob directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at First Reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. And I'm hearing myself in my headphones. I don't know what happened.
Something messed up with Tom's interface.
But something is going on with my USB interface, and now it's throwing me off. You're super quiet. I can't make you loud. It's very
okay. Everything on my mics looks fine on my end.
No, I'm not. I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming me. It's okay. I'm blaming me. All right, I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, which is on the right side of the page. If you do that, it'll take you to a PayPal donation site. So we want to thank Benjamin and Jason for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Ben and Jay.
For certain, Benjamin and Jason, thank you very much for those PayPal donations. We really do appreciate it.
We also want to thank our 123 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service that you sign up to become a supporting member of our listening community. Every month, Patreon will take some money from you and give it to us. So we want to thank our 123 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yes, indeed. That is patreon.com/AVRant Podcast for anyone who might like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. And beginning of the month again. So it looks like we only lost one Patreon person from a credit card that didn't work and got purged. So that's pretty good.
Could be.
That's
could be. Or it could be a continuing of the mass exodus of people who were mad at us about gluten.
There is that.
Yeah. So
a comment that we did not make but got blamed for, and almost for certain has us mixed up with somebody else. We're not sure who. We really
Somebody's
don't know.
Super mad that we don't like gluten around here, and said we must not like money, and then drop their Patreon support. I'm like, did we say something about gluten? I don't remember saying something about gluten. I mean, I have in many times in my life said things about gluten, both positive and negative, but I don't remember saying anything about it on the podcast.
No,
so, you know.
That really does not ring any bells. It is not the sort of thing we would comment on the podcast. So yeah, we were mixed up with someone else, but I don't know if that person is listening to us anymore. So whatever.
Probably not.
That's how it goes. That's all right.
That's how it goes.
Nobody is obligated to pay us to listen to this podcast. We put up the whole Patreon thing there because some people were like, hey, you should have one because I'd like to give you some money. We're like, all right. What did it take? It took you like 8 months to actually do that, to like twist your arm, let people give you money.
That sounds like me. All right. Let me see here. We got some... Oh, no. We're continuing with listeners. Okay. So if you cannot support us financially, we understand. So if you do something to support us, let us know what it is, and we will mention you on this podcast. So Daniel told SVS he bought his subwoofers because of us. Paul posted a user review on Monoprice for their in-ceiling speakers and mentioned us. He also talked us up to RSL, who provided great customer support to him with speedy email replies.
Nice to hear.
We also have a shout out to Herb, I almost said Herb, over at Cross Spectrum Labs. Rob reached out to him to inquire about the shipping for a calibrated UMic 1 to Canada. And once UMic 1s are back in stock, as always, Herb was super helpful. Happily, Cross Spectrum Acoustics, the consultation side of things, is very busy right now with a bunch of big projects. So that combined with UMic 1 stock just starting to get replenished right now means you should expect a late April or early May as the shipping date if you order an individually calibrated UMic 1. That's just a heads up to all of our listeners. So we want to thank Daniel for talking to SVS, Paul for talking to Monoprice and AV Rant, and of course Herb for just being an all-around good guy.
Indeed, yes. Daniel, Paul, and Herb, thank you all very much for supporting AV Rant in various ways, talking us up to SVS and Monoprice and RSL. So, yeah, wonderful stuff. And, thank you very much to Herb for that heads up, because we know listeners are very frequently hearing about Cross Spectrum Labs on the podcast, and then they're like, hey, when's my thing going to ship? So, good to have that information, and it's looking like about a month from now.
You guys remember that I got... all that kitchen remodel stuff. Well, I had a hood vent installed that I had shipped from Canada, and I wanted the upgraded grates things that are a little bit easier to clean and, or more professional looking and had. Well, anyways, so they contacted me and before they shipped and said, hey, we don't have those right now. Can we give you the other ones and we'll refund you the difference? I'm like, I don't want the other ones. Like, what if we send you the other ones and then when we get the ones that you want in stock,
swap them?
We'll send you those. I was like, well, that's fine. I'm not going to have to pay for that, right? And they're like, no, you have to pay for it. You just paid for this, whatever. So that was like 8 months ago, 6 months ago, something like that. And I haven't been like super pesty or anything, but I did email them again this week, and they're like, oh yeah, well you should be getting those pretty soon. And so everybody's short on everything. And the Suez Canal certainly didn't help anything, but there's just all sorts of things going on. So yeah, shipping is a problem.
It seems to be now. Yes.
Yeah. I do want to remind people that if you would like to help me out by sending me images of your gear or theater, send it to Tom at AVRant or Tom at AVGadgets.com. And I will, with permission, express written permission to use your photos in perpetuity for the benefit of myself, then I will potentially use your photos in my articles on AV Gadgets. So go check that out over there. There's quite a few listeners who I know are like, I'm sick of seeing my pictures because Tom seems to like them. So I put them, I do use them. Not always, but I do use them. So even though somebody sent me a picture of his wall when it was cut open with just conduit in it and some electrical wire, I was like, this is exactly the picture I was looking for. Thank you very much. And went back and shoved it in a whole bunch of articles. So we would appreciate that. Also, we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Mike, Kris, Daniel, and Clara. Mike, Kris, Daniel, and Clara.
Yep, I guess I'll repeat them once more. Mike, Kris, Daniel, and Clara, thank you very much for the notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, the notes of encouragement. We do appreciate those. And that's all of our listeners of the week. Thank you all so much for the support. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
So we got some news here from our listener Karl. If you're going pretty darn high end with Sony's 20K VW915, their 35K VW995, or their 80 to 90K depending on the lens, GTZ 380 projectors. From now until September 30th, you can bundle it with a Kaleidoscape system and get a $3,000 discount. Ooh.
Yeah.
Anything that you can give me a $3,000 discount on, I cannot afford. Anyways, the Kaleidoscape players start at $5,000, although that wouldn't include any storage, you know, the actual hard drives and stuff. But, you know, quite the deal.
I guess. I mean, if you were prepared, or at a minimum, to spend $20,000 on your projector, then yeah, you probably are in the market for Kaleidoscape. That is the sort of clientele. Particularly if you're going to spend $90,000 for a projector, then you're definitely probably the clientele for Kaleidoscape. In fact, you might be the clientele for that other service that lets you get first-run movies for like $500 each. That is kind of an exclusive thing, but
right.
There you go.
I thought that was Disney Plus, and I thought it was only $30 each.
That's coming to all the rest of us.
Yeah, no, I'm getting it right. So reviews of the new LG OLED Evo G1 and Sony Master Series A90J are starting to roll in, including comparisons to the regular OLED C1 and 2020 Model CX. And here are the takeaways. So those of you that were wondering about these things. LG's claim that OLED Evo is 20% brighter. That's actually true. But that amounts to 750 or 800 nit peak highlights versus 650 nits on the C1 or CX. For HDR, you can notice if they're side by side, but if you're viewing each TV individually, you're not going to instantly see a difference. The bigger visible difference is in SDR, standard dynamic range. So if you adjust the TV to be inaccurate,
yes,
not accurate. So full white screen white would max out at 140 or 150 nits on a C1 or CX. Now it will go up to almost 400 nits for a short while and then drop down to about a constant 200 nits, which is that protection system that they put in these TVs so that you don't burn them out. But if you're calibrating for a very dark room, SDR is capped at 120 nits anyway, so this is really only applicable for really bright rooms, whatever. So speaking of inaccurate, the Sony A90J can hit peaks of 1300 nits, but only in vivid mode, which is not what you want to do. So in any picture mode with accurate colors is basically identical to the LG G1, but that isn't stopping the ridiculous hype online. To be fair, Sony's previous OLEDs all tended to be a bit dimmer than LG, so if you're comparing older Sony OLEDs to this new A90J, the difference is bigger and more noticeable. And if you enjoy all kinds of edge enhancement and motion smoothing and other video processing, the Sony seems to be a touch better. Which you will never notice if you listen to this podcast because we will tell you the truth.
I'll turn it all off. But if you like to play around with that stuff, the reviewers are saying, yeah, the Sonys look a little bit better if you turn on all the things that take accuracy away. But, you know, that's okay. That's why they put them in there. Some people like the way they look.
Yeah. And those people are wrong. On the gaming front, Sony still doesn't have VRR, or variable refresh rate, and Sony still only has two HDMI 2.1 ports, one of which is the eARC port. So not 2.1. So anyways, LG has 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, plus every flavor of VRR already working out of the box and a handy new game optimizer menu. Yeah, something is askew because I don't know if you saw my headphones like levitate off my head for a second, but I just got an in-computer announcement.
Okay.
It's like 7 million decibels.
Lovely.
So I have to turn you down somehow. Bottom line, if you're in a dark room, save the $1,000 and get the C1, or save even more and get the CX while they're still in stock. The G1 and the A90J can indeed get noticeably brighter in SDR, so for a bright room, maybe that will be worth it for you. So in a normal, home theater type room, or somebody who watches mostly in the evenings, then you get the older ones because the new ones don't really do that much for you.
It's not a gigantic difference. I mean, 20% sounds kind of impressive when you say 20%, but when you were talking, 600, 650, and then you add 20% of that to it, up in the highlights, it's like, yeah, you put them side by side, you can see it's a little bit brighter, but, if you looked at one and then walked out of the room and came back in and looked at the other, you wouldn't notice that. So it seems to be, I mean, it's when you can do in standard dynamic range, like not crazy inaccurate, not, the colors are all blown out or crazy like that. It just not accurate to SDR standards, just getting away from that just to increase the brightness, being able to go up to about 400 nits and then have it back down and have it stay at about 200 nits versus where before it would stay at about 140 or 150, down at that lower end of the scale, because our eyes, it takes ever increasing exponentially greater amounts of light for us to notice a difference. So down at the dimmer end, that 50 nit difference is really quite noticeable, whereas the 100 nit difference up between 650 and 750 is much less noticeable. So that's a significant thing for people who are wanting to put OLEDs in bright rooms and we're like, SDR content just looks too dim all the time. This will make a difference. So yeah, it's not nothing, but for $1,000 more, a lot of us can stick with the C1 or the C10.
Cool. I'm just hearing like 1,000 things happening in the other room. I can hear my phone going off, my wife's computer. There's all sorts of stuff going on in there. Comments from our listeners. Patricio, which is a fun name to say, was using a Dayton APA 150 Class D amp just for his top rears in his 7.2.4 setup. Woohoo! Represent Patricio, me too. It died, and it was only a few months old. He had bought it from Parts Express, and they were very good with their customer service. At first, they said an exchange would be no problem, but then they checked and informed him they were out of stock. So he could either wait or just get a full refund. And that is exactly the kind of customer service I want.
That is very nice to hear.
That is what I want. That's what I wanted. The customer service, like, hey, we'll send you a new one, no problem. Ooh, we're out of stock, so you want the money back?
Right.
I'll be like, yeah, okay, good. Not
that is stand up.
So he took the full refund, and then he bought the little Fosse Class D amp that we've recommended a few times. He wanted a compact form factor, so that fit the bill, and so far he's very happy with it. It runs cool. It seems to have oodles of power and then very clear sound, and it was cheaper than the Dayton, so he gives it a big thumbs up. So there you go.
Yes.
All right, Patricia.
Yep. That is, he was like, hey, for anybody who just needs to expand their 9-channel receiver for the additional 2 channels to take it up to 7.2.4, he thinks it's a really good choice. One thing to note for the people who desperately want a trigger, 12-volt trigger for powering it on and off.
Right.
The little Fosse amplifier does not have a trigger. It is a rocker switch on the front, just on or off. So as long as you are fine with physically flicking that, or frankly, just leaving it on all the time, because it really isn't burning very much power at idle, then yeah, that's the one thing to be aware of there.
Okay. I will say that I like, every time I say the name or the word Fosse, I always think of Robin Williams in The Birdcage.
Yes, of course.
When he does the little Fosse, but I want to just keep it all inside. It's just, I don't know how politically correct that movie is. I don't know what to think about anything anymore these days, but I'm gonna never not like that movie. It's just I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I do like it. I just think it's hilarious. Jonathan, I requested input about which voice assistants work the best. Jonathan's vote goes to Google Assistant, primarily because Google search search delivers superior results. Not always, maybe, but it does, in his opinion. The Assistant might give you an answer first, but then it always gives you the option to search the web if you didn't like its answer. However, Jonathan notes that the key to having the best experience everywhere you go seems to be fully embedding yourself in the given ecosystem. He's gone all Google and Android, including Android Auto. Well, I'm not going to buy a car based on that, but okay. So it all works very well for him, but he also knows people have fully embedded themselves in Apple's ecosystem, including Apple's CarPlay, and they report being equally happy and satisfied. One of us. Amazon isn't offering a similarly capable car integration system yet. So for Jonathan, they're too busy putting chips in their workers' heads and not letting them go to the bathroom. So for Jonathan, he feels that puts Google and Apple ahead. 3/5 of my family has an Android phone, and my wife and son who have the iPhone are not the ones that are going to care about the rest of that. So I could definitely, I'm leaning myself towards Google Assistant, but I'm happy to get any more advice people want to give me.
Yep, that is one person's take. I do not disagree. So thank you, Jonathan, for weighing in on that.
Right. Now, I got seriously wondering what the heck's going on with this thing. All right, it's just going to bug me.
Distracted Tom.
Could put Tom's always distracted. Now I've got these 3 printed panels looking at me, and I'm like, and you know what I did? Okay, so I did what probably everybody would do. They took the panels that they had out, and they put the new panels in, right? And I sat there with 3 panels, and I kept looking around my theater going, I feel like I could put one there. So now the 3 panels are back in the
Oh, okay. They didn't end up on your ceiling?
No, they didn't end up on my ceiling. I'm not putting them on my ceiling. But God, I gotta clean that fan. But yeah, they're definitely. And like I said, I'm gonna paint this room gray. I'm very close to biting the bullet and doing it, but just haven't quite done it yet. There's a lot of stuff to move out of here, which is really the big problem. Let's get the questions here. Jason said he found our podcast about a year ago, and he's really enjoyed listening. He's gone through 3 episodes so far.
It's about what we would make it
in
through.
real time. So there's a room in their basement that might one day become a dedicated theater. He actually put a 5.1 system down there using his old Polk speakers and the PB1000, but it's the kids' playroom, so until they're older, the main system for watching movies and TV is a living room upstairs. It's definitely not a dedicated home theater space, but he has managed to install a 5.2.4 setup with all clips reference Premiere speaker. Is this upstairs in the living room?
Yes, this is the upstairs.
Is that what he's talking
That's
about?
what we're focusing on, the upstairs living room. Yeah.
So he's so in his upstairs, he's managed to install a 5.2.4 setup with all clips reference Premiere speakers, dual SVS PC 4000 cylinder subs, and the 77-inch OLED that on an articulated wall mount, which he still wishes were bigger or closer, but this is what the aesthetics will allow. Okay, you gotta live with what you gotta live with.
That's right.
I feel your pain. We'll notice what?
In the photos.
I guess in the photo. I haven't gotten that far yet. We'll notice a pair of in-wall speakers up high on the front wall, but those came with the house and they aren't being used. And we'll also notice that both of his PC 4000 subs are at the back of the room. This was not by accident or solely for looks, although it does work best for aesthetics as well. He tried different placements, having both at the back provides the most tactile response for the seats, and after adjusting them with a mini DSP and then feeding them a mono signal from his Denon, his room EQ measurements indicate he's getting about the most linear and uniform response across his seats. So that's good. It's fine.
Yes.
All right, great.
Yeah.
He's put in the work. He's put down a rug, and the furniture is fairly plush, but dedicated room treatments are really not being considered. The whole right side wall and back wall are windows. There's a fireplace on the left, and it's a flat ceiling and hardwood. And if he's being honest, though, it doesn't really nearly sound half as bad as he had feared. But he's always looking to improve, so that rug is not thick.
Not particularly. Doesn't look
thick
super thick, but yeah, I mean, clearly aesthetics are a priority in this room, and that is totally fine. Makes sense. This is the main living room of the house. It looks very nice in here. It looks very clean and well organized. The cylinder subs at the very back of the room are kind of like in a bay window, and in behind, and not exactly a dining area, like a little nook area. Maybe it's a reading area. There is a little coffee table back there. And then, yes, windows all along the right side wall, windows all along that back wall, which is the bay window. And yeah, he's used some of the wedge-shaped Klipsch speakers. He's actually got up firing at the front of the room, perched on top of his towers, which are Klipsch towers up at the front of the room there. And then he's used the same wedge speakers, but mounted high up on the rear walls as rear heights. So yes, a 5.2.4 configuration.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, my first suggestion is that I think you should get like some black but reflective, like eye patterns, like eyeball, like evil looking eyeball patterns, and put them on the back of your subs so that they're facing out, and they'll only reflect light. It'll only be noticeable during the night. Just be
like aiming outside.
Yeah,
you don't see them from inside your room.
You see it from outside. Yeah, people.
Just somebody looking into the window.
That's the first thing I would do.
All right.
Not going to help your sound though.
No.
The basement room is smaller, enclosed, no windows, fully carpeted, and the ceiling is acoustic ceiling tiles. It's also his old Polk speakers versus his Klipsch reference Premiere that are in the living room. The basement setup doesn't sound as detailed or as high in fidelity, but it does sound warmer and simply more inviting and pleasing. Now, is that mostly because of room acoustics? He knows the speakers themselves sound different from one another, but doesn't think that counts for all of it. If the room acoustics are making that big of a difference, then he's willing to consider any number of ideas for treating the living room. So, how worthwhile do we think acoustic treatments in the living room would be? And then, how can he realistically go about treating that room? Curtains over the windows are probably fine, but that doesn't seem like it would be enough. So, what are our ideas? All right, so why does it sound different in the basement? Are room acoustics an issue here? Probably not as much as you think, because, well, the acoustic tiles in the ceilings are certainly doing something.
Yeah.
The carpet on the floor is probably doing something, but
and
other
being
than that, you
a
really
smaller
don't have.
and enclosed room, that's doing something too.
But I would think that the Polks have a natural roll off at the top end anyways, and I
Yep.
wouldn't be surprised if that's the warmer part that you're hearing. I don't think that. I think that if you took your Polks and put them upstairs and your clips and put them downstairs, the Polks would sound more lively because they are, in fact, more lively. Just
The clips
they
would
are.
sound more lively.
Yeah. And the Polks upstairs would sound more warm because
Yeah.
I think that high end roll off.
Yeah, I do think. I mean, I think it's a combo, right? I don't think it's entirely the speakers alone and that the room acoustics play no role. I definitely think they do, but I also think the speakers are playing a significant role because this is an instance where these two different speakers that you're dealing with do have significantly different sound profiles. If you were like, I have some paradigms downstairs and some RBH upstairs, and I'm hearing a wildly different difference, then I'd be like, that's pretty much got to be mostly the room, because those sets of speakers I would expect to sound more similar than different in most respects. But when it's older Polk speakers versus Klipsch Reference Premier, I'm like, nah, those are significantly different sounding speakers. So it's a combo of both. I don't think that acoustically treating your living room upstairs is somehow going to make it sound as like warm and cozy as the downstairs with the Polks. I agree with Tom. If you brought the Polks upstairs, I think you would notice a significant difference in sound. But that said, I do think if there is some way to add some acoustic treatment to the room upstairs, that will be beneficial. Because
I'll be honest with you, if you were asking me about downstairs, I would still be saying add some acoustic treatments, especially to that first reflective point within that wall, that little cubby that your speakers are in.
Yeah, but for now, that's not his priority. So if we're looking at this upstairs room, I mean, it is going to be a challenge because clearly we could suggest freestanding panels that go in front of any of the windows in that, but I'm like, you've actually got a door at what is basically your primary first reflection point on the right side there. Then, going towards the back, it's like, I don't think anybody wants panels that are standing in front of that bay window. It looks like these actually are windows that get used, that are opened, that don't have curtains drawn over them 100% of the time. On the left side, you've got a fireplace, which can't be completely covered up. You've got a sort of a inset shelves and that are where the first reflection point on the left side would be, plus a chair standing there. So this is going to be more a matter of just overall reducing some decay times, overall reducing some reverberation in this room. I'm very glad that you've already said it doesn't sound as bad as you feared it might, because that means that, if we don't spot treat the first reflections, that at least you aren't having egregious problems with those right away, and we have to find some way of doing it, because I think it would be a real big challenge in here. So this is, to me, mostly about just reducing some decay times, which means we can put panels wherever you can fit some panels. I'm definitely looking at the rear corners, right? That was my first thought. The rear corners looks like somewhere that something could go, either that blends into the wall or just adds decoration.
See, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that you get fabric swatches from GIK or whomever that you're going to order these panels from, and match it as best you can to the wall color, because it's almost impossible to tell from just online what pictures, images. You have to get them home and put them up against the wall, and get panels that are the color of your current walls, and then anywhere that is a blank spot in the wall, consider putting a panel there. So that would be behind or to the right of your front right speaker, perhaps behind your left speaker, kind of behind the TV over there. In the back of the room, you're looking at behind your surround. Behind your surround left, I guess below where where your elevation speaker is, your rear height speaker is.
I mean, that whole wall there, both rear corners, honestly, you kind of could do not quite floor to ceiling, but the majority of the surfaces of those rear corners, either blending into the existing wall color or make it a decoration. So the front wall, back wall, those are prime candidates. There's the spot above the fireplace, potentially that could be a printed panel
has that
goes,
little picture in it.
Yeah, there's a picture up there already, so that you could replace that with a nice printed panel and have artwork that is also an acoustic panel. The ceiling, I don't know. Are we gonna suggest doing anything on? I mean, it is a big flat ceiling, but whether or not you want anything looking like it's hanging down from that, I don't know, a little questionable maybe.
This room already, just from like these pictures, it feels a little bit, it's so long.
Right.
The room itself is so big that it feels like the ceiling's lower because of it.
I think it's a pretty standard 8-foot ceiling, though, because I think it's an optical illusion with the crown molding and then to the top of that. Like, I don't think that entrance that doesn't have a door, I think that's probably taller than a standard door. I think that's probably like door plus trim height, and then you got crown molding above it. So this looks like a standard 8-foot ceiling in here.
Yeah. I think I wasn't saying that it wasn't. I'm saying that optically it already looks a little bit shorter than it probably is, and putting something up there might
on the ceiling.
So if you can run that up the flagpole and somebody doesn't immediately shoot it down, then maybe. But I don't know that would be my first thing. I also like where you have the wainscoting around the fireplace, you know, on the left and the right of the fireplace. Getting a panel that fits within that wainscoting. Yeah. Might be something. And I guess to the left and right of the top above the fireplace looks like it also has the same thing, though I can't see both sides. So you might consider putting something in those little spots that are sort of, you know, either I would go with just the same color as what you have.
Probably.
But, I mean, this obviously, these windows to the right side, they open to your sunroom or your porch or whatever that is over there. So that's, you know, it looks like you would look through that to look outside. And if you have a pool or a back, you know, a backyard that kids would be playing in, you certainly want to you don't want to block all that stuff off. So yeah, I'm with Rob. Freestanding panels don't make a ton of sense in here, but just sort of spot treating anywhere you can certainly will do something. Yeah, and it might not be a night and day difference, but it's probably going to be a difference that you're going to realize. I imagine that you would spend, you know, after you did it, you might spend a week or so thinking, I'm not sure this is really doing anything, and then it'll hit you. There'll be something that happens. You're like, oh, that's a lot clearer than I remember that ever being. Oh, that's not, you know, that is not ringing as much as I remember, and all of that. So,
now, I would say definitely try not to do anything that's thinner than 2 inches. 2 inches would be the thinnest. Otherwise, I don't think it's actually worth doing. So at least 2 inches. But like, to me, the rear corners are where you could potentially go thicker without it completely destroying the look of the room or looking completely out of place. So as thick as you can, but I'm certainly thinking any of the side wall placements around the fireplace that we've mentioned, probably 2 inches is about as deep as you'll be able to go without it looking a bit strange, and then try to go deeper in those corners. And it doesn't have to straddle the corners. You don't have to start getting 45-degree angles in this room where that visually might look a bit strange. You can, you know, put them flat against the actual back wall, put them flat against the adjacent side wall, and have the panels in the actual corners like that, still 90-degree angles, but try to get them as thick as you can. And I think that'll help. I think it'll just, overall, it'll reduce your decay times a little bit. Will it sound like the Polks downstairs? No, I don't think it will. I don't think that's ever going to be the way unless you do some heavy EQ, and that comes into the next part.
So he's read in several places that it's best to limit your room correction to only EQing below the room's transition frequency, or maybe 500 hertz at the most. He gave that a try, but it definitely sounded worse in his living room setup than when he just ran multi-QXT32 as normal. So what are our opinions? Should he take the time to fiddle with other settings, like maybe limiting to 1 kilohertz or 2 kilohertz? Well, I mean, you've already done what I think that is the most I would ever do, which is I would limit it, listen, and go, ugh, and then turn it back on. So there is real reasons that people have for limiting room correction to a certain point. And Rob will go through all of the whatever that is. But in my experience, and I think in most people's experience, it's the room EQ or room correction rarely, in my experience, does something to make things sound worse, as long as it's, you know, a good room correction system.
Right.
It normally either makes things sound better or doesn't change it at all because it can't.
Right.
So if it can't change things to make things sound better across multiple seats, then it just does nothing. And so why limit it? Because I think that, especially in a room that's reflective like yours is, any amount of room correction that it can adjust up in that top end, any little bit that it can do is gonna make a pretty noticeable difference.
Yeah, I think part of it is that in this scenario that you have, where you have a room that we can predict is probably quite reflective, and you're using clip speakers that we know have, pretty predominant high end. So the chances are, in your scenario, that XT32 actually is maybe rolling off relative to the natural response, tamping down the high frequencies a little bit, and that would make a significant difference. Whereas if you
Right.
gated, curtained the response so that it isn't EQing the treble whatsoever, that you would have just the unmitigated, tipped up high end that's coming out of the speakers natively, plus it's reflecting around your room with very little to absorb it right now. So chances are, once you do have some panels in there, you're definitely going to want to run Odyssey again. But I think a fair amount of that thinking of I want to curtain the response and not touch any of the high end, I think some of that is a holdover from when we had auto EQ systems that weren't terribly good and really
Right.
didn't have the granularity to do a decent job up in the treble. I also think there's a lot of people who are still remembering the days where we only had systems that measured in one microphone position, or a ton of people used to do the thing where, they would measure in 3, 5, or 8 positions, but it would essentially be one position. Like they would move the microphone. They're like, this is the seat I care about, so I'm going to make all my measurements here. And then it just made things way, way worse in every other location in the room. Now that we have these spatial averaging, you can spread the microphone positions out a little bit, and therefore if there's a hump in one spot and a dip in another spot, the same frequency, but it's a hump in one mic position and a dip in the other, it's a smart enough system now that it isn't going to EQ that, and it's not going to do more harm than good. So I agree with Tom. I think that XT32 is sophisticated enough, granular enough, and as long as you follow the recommended microphone positioning as you do it and actually get a proper spatial average. I mean, Tom and I, we both run our multi-Q XT32 systems full range. We don't curtain our responses. And
Right.
we've been happy with those results. So I don't think you need to...
I just ran it again. I ran it this weekend.
There you go.
I put in new speakers I'm reviewing. So
yeah, I don't think you need to really continue stressing about this too much.
You answered your own question when you said you
Well, he's
tried it and it
double-checking.
sounded
Yeah.
worse. I mean, I think at that point you stop.
Do run it again. If you do get panels and install them, do run it again.
Well, and I will say, I will at least double check my subwoofer response too.
Sure.
I don't think that adding the kind of panels in the places that we're
shouldn't
talking
do
about
much to that.
should make much of a difference, but I would double check that 100%. So his surround speaker placement is basically the rear corners of the living room. He knows this isn't optimal, but it's what works for aesthetics and his walkways and doorways and all that. So he started with them aimed directly at his main listening possession in the middle, and he had no complaints with them aimed that way. Then he tried forum suggestions, left surround aimed at the far right seat. So you got to stay off the forums, Haas. Right surround aimed at the far left seat, pointed straight toward the front wall, pointed straight across from each other. To be completely honest, he hasn't noticed a huge difference with any of them. So in his setup, what we recommend? We would recommend straightforward. Actually, in your case, since they're back in the corners, I would probably cheat them in a little bit. Angle
Like you
them
would
in
have
just a
some
little
toe
bit.
in.
Just because of that first reflection right there against that wall that's so close that you wouldn't normally.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're far enough behind his seats that I in this scenario, I wouldn't have them pointed straight at each other. Because then you're really off axis in terms of where your
40,
seats
50,
are.
50 degrees off axis.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be okay.
And I wouldn't point them straight forward at the front wall, because I think that's going to give you some odd sounds there. So in this scenario, I think it makes sense to have them towed in to some degree. Now, to me, the toe in, the exact amount of toe in, all that really matters is that all the seats that you care about are within the cone of dispersion of the speaker.
Right.
So that you aren't having wildly different response going to one side of the couch versus the other because you've towed it in so heavily that you're outside of the cone of even dispersion. And clip speakers having that horn loaded design, they have a pretty obvious transition. If you get yourself, you just play pink noise, just the level test tone that's built into your AV receiver, just play some pink noise out of your surround speakers. You physically get up close to them, have yourself about a foot away from it, your face about a foot away from the front of the speaker. and you move yourself left to right. And with clip speakers, you will notice a pretty obvious point at some degree to the left and right of straight ahead, where the sound changes quite noticeably in that pink noise. And it's like, as long as you're within that cone that's created there, where it sounds relatively even within that cone, have that cone aimed at, you know, all the seats that you care about. And that's how I would approach that.
Right, which probably would, no matter if you aimed it directly at the middle seat, directly at one corner of the couch or not, it's almost certainly going to be. That's why you're not noticing a difference.
That's right.
Because you're all within that probably 15 to 20 to 30 degrees off axis, where
and
things start to get
maybe
weird.
What was happening with them pointed straight at the front wall and pointed straight across at each other is that now every seat is so far off axis,
right,
that everything is getting the outside of the cone response. Right.
So any other glaring issues in the living room that leap out of this? I don't see any glaring issues in here. I mean, to me, I would consider using those in-wall speakers that are already there as your heights. And
he mentioned in his email he kind of gave it a try and they weren't up to snuff. So that's fair enough.
Okay. That's fair enough.
They came with
but let's put it this way. Let's say they were up to snuff,
Sure.
though, and then you could put top middles someplace if you can convince the wife or whomever is the
you can
decorator.
have 6 overheads.
Is that
really the solution in this living room? That's what's missing.
But he's got all the speakers. That's what I'm saying. He's already got the speakers. But no, I don't see anything that you can. I personally don't see anything that I think. It seems to me you've ticked all the boxes.
Yeah.
And right now, you know, there's only so much you can do in a space like this, considering that you've got aesthetic concerns. And I know, like, you go to the forums or Reddit or whatever, and aesthetic concerns don't play into anybody's decision-making process. They're like, you should get 4 more subs. I'm like, what? No. What? No. No one's doing that. You know, aesthetic concerns are a real thing, and I would, I think you've done pretty good in here, and, you know, I don't really see any reason why you need to change a whole bunch. If you can get some room treatments in here, it'll probably help a bit, and I would call it good.
I agree.
Ilango is trying to advise the parents of some close friends. He's known them from over 30 years, and they're more like extended family, so that means they're not going to listen to you at all. They're a retired couple. They'd ideally like to keep the total budget around $5,000 to $6,000, although less is fine. If it's worthwhile to spend more, that's fine too. And they have 3 rooms to address, none of which need to be surround sound. There's an open concept family room and living room, dining room area.
So living room, dining room area is the second room.
Oh,
family
okay.
room is the first room.
Okay,
yeah.
Family room, living room, dining room area, and bedroom. So 3 areas. They're looking to outfit with speaker systems. They are used to physical media, records, and CDs. They aren't against trying streaming, but it isn't their go-to. They'll also have TV service in the family room. Ilango isn't sure which TV service provider they're using. Okay. They would like to be able to put on a record or CD and have the music play in all 3 of those rooms. So Ilango was thinking maybe MusicCast from Yamaha would be the best solution, but Ilango doesn't have first-hand experience with it, so he's hoping we can offer some advice on that front as well. So the 2 ways that jump into my mind of doing distributed audio the way that these people are talking about is either a distribution amp, which is a little bit more complicated for most people.
Physical wiring.
Or something like MusicCast from Yamaha. Those are the 2 ways I would do it. And, you know, depending on how technologically savvy they are, if you're the one hooking this up, then all you have to do is walk them through how it works. But like the distribution amp is harder to set up, but once you have it set up, it's easier to use, I think, than MusicCast might be. Depending on how comfortable they are.
Yeah, that really
buttons.
depends. Yeah, because if they're used to using their smartphones or used to using a tablet, then so obviously,
well, they said records. So when you say records, it makes me think they don't like to open their phones to listen to music or to control things.
Maybe not. Yeah, I mean, you know, Denon / Marantz would have Hios. That would be the closest equivalent from the mass market brands. There is, of course, Sonos, but all 3 of those systems are controlled by an app on your phone or tablet. Now, you could, if they don't normally use smartphones as their day-to-day use, there's nothing wrong with getting like, you know, an iPad, just a regular iPad that doesn't cost that much these days, and that's their dedicated device for controlling their music system, and that can totally work. So I wouldn't be against any of those. I wouldn't be against going Sonos. I wouldn't be against going Hios or MusicCast. In my opinion, I think the MusicCast app is well, Sonos is probably the easiest to understand, but for everything they want to do, I do think MusicCast is the nicest solution. It's very, very easy to just say, here's what I want to play, and then put a check mark in each of the rooms that I want to play it, whether that's 1, 2, or all 3. And you can't get a whole lot more simple than that. And then if they do want to dip their toe into Spotify or something like that, that's built right into the MusicCast app as well, which is true for Hios and Sonos as well. But I lean a little bit MusicCast on this one.
Okay. I mean, I can get behind that.
Yeah.
So the family room will have a TV. Wait a second.
Yeah.
Did I already read this? No, I didn't read this yet. Okay. Even though it's an open concept space, the TV area is kept quite small. There's one primary chair, a recliner directly facing the TV and only about 8 feet away. There's a couch over to the right, but the sound for the recliner is what matters. The TV is wall mounted, but putting on a 3-in-1 stand instead would be fine. So the TV is wall mounted. The family room will also be where the AV receiver and all the sources will be kept, and the looks need to be kept nice and clean. Ilango was actually quite relieved to see the new SVS 3000 micro sub, as that's exactly the sort of discrete size needed in order to convince them to include a sub. So a pair or possibly left, center, right set of sleek on-wall speakers would be the ideal. Almost certainly that SVS 3000 micro sub with a wireless transmitter, and then they'll also need the AV receiver that can send the same sources to 2 other rooms, a record player and a disc player for CDs and Blu-rays, or perhaps they should just get an Ultra HD Blu-ray player at this point. They don't have a 4K TV yet, so what do we suggest for each of these items? So I would recommend a left-right, and I'd skip the center just for cost. I don't think it's going to give you any real benefit.
It also keeps it super simple for the other 2 rooms, which are also going to be stereo, because now you can just say, okay, all my sources, they just output a stereo signal. I never have to worry. Although MusicCast does a great job of handling any down mixing. You know, if you did happen to be playing surround sound out of the main zone, that can continue to happen in the family room while it automatically creates a 2-channel down mix for the dining room and the bedroom. So MusicCast can handle that. You could do left, center, right, but I agree with Tom. Let's keep it simple. Left and right is probably all they need are 2.1.
Right, 2.1. So if we're going MusicCast, then it's Yamaha all the way around for all this stuff. It does mean that for the MusicCast, you do need a receiver in each room, right?
Well, you need some kind of device that is getting it. We'll get into that a bit when we talk about the other rooms. But for this family room, we're going to have an AV receiver. And the good news is any sources that are plugged into that AV receiver that lives in the family room, the Yamaha AV receiver, that just becomes a source. Yeah. So in the MusicCast app, you just say, what is my source? Well, it's this input on my Yamaha receiver. And then what rooms is it playing in? Well, family room and bedroom right now, or all 3, or just one of them. Yeah.
And I would definitely go with an Ultra HD Blu-ray player.
Yes.
There's no reason not to. And then it gives you access to all the apps as well. Maybe not all of them, but it gives you access to all the apps that you're going to care about. So if they want to start dabbling in apps, they can do it that way.
Right.
The Yamaha receiver will be able to do some natively as well. Right. So there's that.
Yeah, the MusicCast app, it's all built into there. So they got a bunch of music streaming services. So let's go through in order. What would you say for on-wall speakers in the family room that are going to get mounted beside the on-wall TV? I only had one that really jumped to mind.
Okay, what's yours?
That would be Klipsch's Reference Premier on-wall speakers. I think, they're just a nice black, sleek look that'll fit nicely onto your front wall. And what I was thinking of here is you don't need crazy loud output to handle, the 8-foot distance to that recliner, but you do need something that, first of all, isn't going to tax the AV receiver, and that will have enough output that it's going to be able to blend with that 3000 micro sub. And so to me, it checks all the boxes. I'd go for the one that actually, in this instance, has 2 woofers and the horn-loaded tweeter in the middle. That is the RP240D in the Klipsch Reference Premier on-wall series. They go for $350 each. Now, I'm pretty sure Ilango is in Canada, and I don't know if this couple that he's talking about is also in Canada. So they are available. Gibby's sells Klipsch, so you can get to those very same speakers in Canada. They retail for $450 each because, you know, Canadian markup, but and exchange rate. But yeah, that would be the ones I would point you to.
I mean, the first ones that jumped to my mind were those ELAC debuts.
Okay.
Those are nice and flat. You know, I think they have a downfire and whatever. I wrote an article about best on-wall speakers. I actually had to go back and look at it. Those clips aren't even on there, which I should probably add them.
I think they're worth having on there.
Yeah, there's some other ones that you can give them sort of an idea of what of what some of the options are out there. There's the KEFs, the T101s, which are good, but they don't have a lot of extension.
Yeah, and as your only left-right, like I think they're great as a surround solution, but as your only left-right, they don't hop out at me for this one. Yeah. Right.
This article was really written for your surround speakers. So that's sort of what I was going for there. I mean, if you want to go more expensive, then you could look at the RBH's Ultras. You could look at the Legacy audio. Which is really
that's blowing this budget.
Blow your budget completely.
Yeah, that's blowing.
But those are options. And if they really want something, you know, different and nicer, I mean, the Martin Logan, with those little flat ones they have or whatever.
I suppose. But I'm thinking if this is a lot for TV and it's got to go in a room that's open concept, but you're not too crazy far away, I think those Klipsches work well. The AV receiver, I'm going to point you straight to if they do have a Costco membership. See if they can get the TSR 700, the Yamaha TSR 700. But it's also known as the RXV 6A. So that is the model I would go for. You might be going, why the 7?
3 HDMI 2.1 inputs.
Yeah. Well, you're ready for the future, and you might be going, well, why go for the one that's a 7-channel model? Because that's the one that has the good version of YPOW. That's really the main reason I'm saying that. And the cost isn't crazy. $550 in the US, or what's it going for up here in Canada? $850 in Canada. Craziness, but that's okay. They can afford that one. Now let's see. They wanted a record player, right? Now the first record player I would point almost anybody to is Audio-Technica's. It's now the LP120X because they did a slight revision from the original LP120. It's now the LP120X, but that's a very affordable and really good turntable that I would recommend to just about anybody. It goes for $300 in the States, goes for $400 up in Canada. So I think that's reasonable. However, Yamaha has a turntable that has MusicCast built in. So this is a turntable you could use without even turning the AV receiver on. You could use it in the other rooms if you wanted to. So that is the TT-N503 MusicCast turntable from Yamaha. So that is something you could consider. It goes for $700 in the States, $900 in Canada. So it's more than double the price, but something you could consider. And as far as the disc player, I just point you to Sony's X800 M2. First of all, it's a universal disc player, so if they ever wanted to try an SACD or a DVD audio disc, it'll actually play the thing. I believe in stereo only, but that's all they need anyway, so totally fine on that front. And then one of the reasons I'm suggesting the Sony highest in this case is because since they don't have a 4K HDR TV yet, this Sony is one of the ones where at least you can do a little bit of adjustment on the HDR to SDR conversion. So if it looks a bit too dim or a bit too bright, if they happen to get any 4K discs, I don't know if they will, but if they did and they're like, it looks a little too dim or a little too bright, at least the Sony players let you adjust that on the HDR to SDR conversion. So the X800 M2.
Yeah, one of the things you might have to reassure them too is that, you know, it will play DVDs, it'll play CDs, it'll play all the stuff.
Every kind of disc of that size. Every kind of disc of that size.
And if you really want to let them like get involved and not just have you give them the recommendations and you go out and buy the stuff, if you just send them to Audio-Technica to their website, they have oodles of record players.
They do.
Of all different, you know, price points and whatever, and they can decide which one sounds the best to them, because they're all going to be very good. And Audio-Technica has really seems to embrace this whole vinyl revolution, whatever, resurgence. So that's something you can do with them as well. Oh my God, look at all these links. I guess I just go
because I had Canadian links in there too. Yeah, all right. That's all the things I just said.
All right, for the living room, dining room, they want just a pair of speakers for listening to music. Apparently, even the 3000 micro is out of the question as far as the subwoofer goes. So a pair of tower speakers is what they're looking for.
This is what we have been told.
As mentioned, they'd like to use the sources that are already in the family room. Running speaker wire from the family room to this room is not out of the question, but it would be even more convenient if there were a way to send the signal wirelessly. So what do we recommend for a pair of speakers that would be wireless? And what would be the wireless solution? Well, if you're going with the Yamaha, you need something that has MusicCast on it, which could be just a cheap AV, whatever accessories for less.
Right. Receiver. Yeah, you could do a cheap Yamaha receiver. They do have their dedicated MusicCast amp, which is a nice little wireless amplifier. Let's see, the model number is the WXA50. So there's also a WX something else 50, which is just the preamplifier version, doesn't have any amplifiers built in, but you would want the one with amplifiers built in. So that's the WXA50, goes for $500 in the States, goes for $650 in Canada. Nice, small, sleek unit that would get the job done, absolutely. So yeah, that's pretty much the solution as far as the MusicCast and making it wireless. Now, the RX V6A / TSR 700 that I suggested for the family room, since you're really only powering 2 speakers in the family room, you definitely could use the Zone 2 output. It does have Zone 2, like powered Zone 2 output. So if you need to save a little bit of money somewhere in the budget, you definitely could run speaker wire from that to this dining room and just use the Zone 2. That'll totally work too. But speakers, what do we want for a pair of tower speakers? My recommendation, I was like, get some SVS Prime Pinnacles. That you can point to all the awards that they won last year. They're really nice. They'll totally work. They fit the budget. So Prime Pinnacles was my original thought on this one.
Oh my God, it's so loud. I have to figure out what's going on. It's so loud. It's hurting my ears. I am currently reviewing the Ilango Technologies AT3 tower speakers, which have the folded horn inside of them.
Okay.
For additional bass. These are, wow, they're expensive. $3,300 a pair. So maybe these are not going to be right for you.
That may be a bit
tough. But I will tell you, initial impressions of these things, surprisingly not bassy, considering. Now, I'm have them crossed over. I have them set to small. But surprisingly not, overblown in the bass department, at least when used in this situation. Now, I will be running them full range and doing some tests on them, stuff like that. Yeah, the SVSs, I think, are not a bad choice here. This, again, I think is something that you should let them do to a certain extent. You should say, hey, this is how much I recommend. These are the things that I recommend you buy that you don't need to go pick out yourself.
Right.
Okay. And this is how much money it's going to cost. And then you've got this much money left. Pick a turntable and go listen.
Sure.
Because seeing speakers in person, I think, is going to be a big part of whether or not they're going to like them. You know what I mean? Yep. And it might have everything to do with their physical size, and getting the SVS Pinnacle Towers in there, which are kind of that trapezoidal weird
No,
design,
that's the
right?
Ultras. The Ultras have the
is it the Ultras?
angles.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I still would not discount bookshelf speakers on a stand.
Right.
I
think they have a vision in mind, is what it sounds like. And I mean, I'm not super against it. I mean, obviously there are quite a few tower options that you could, if they love Klipsch's sound, you could certainly look at some Klipsch reference Premier towers in here. You could look at ELAC. Right. You could look at, on and on and on. Well, Aperion, if you are in Canada, you got Paradigm, PSB. I mean, there's oodles, but
free two-way shipping from Aperion, free two-way shipping from SVS. You can at least audition those guys.
Right.
And that would be maybe worthwhile if it's an aesthetic thing. If they think they're going to get a lot more bass out of a tower, I'm here to tell you that while you technically, you get something like the Ultra Bookshelf speakers from SVS, you're not going to be sitting there going, "Where's all my bass?"
Right.
No, it's going to sound pretty good. So, all right. So lastly, they want a basic compact system for the bedroom. Again, they want to play the same sources as the family room, but this room must be wireless. So what can we suggest here? Well, again, the same Yamaha device that Rob suggested before.
Yeah, you could do the same amplifier, the Musiccast amp, and just connect that to a pair of regular bookshelf speakers. Take your pick. I mean, there's a gazillion and one bookshelf speakers out there to fit just about any budget. So it's kind of hard to narrow that down. I mean, I tried to sort of contain it to just a number of brands so that you aren't going to a gazillion places to order.
SVS,
however, another thing you could do is just get a Musiccast speaker, because they have the nice Musiccast 50 speaker, which is just one unit. It'll play the music. You don't have to do anything else. It'll just connect to the Musiccast system, and you're done. I mean, it is a $500 speaker, but, you know, that'll be the system for the bedroom, and it's one unit, and you're done. So, to me, that's definitely something to consider.
Right. And if I'm talking over the top of Rob a little bit here, it's because he keeps cutting in on that out on me. Okay. I don't exactly know why. So I'm sorry, Rob, if I'm talking over the top.
No, we're all good.
I like the Yamaha speaker suggestion.
Sure.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. But again, bookshelf speakers in this case would be great. I would, you know, if they're trying to mix things up and get different sounds in different rooms, or if they want to keep everything to be the same, then, you know, picking somebody like Klipsch or SVS or Aperion and just buying all the speakers from them, I think makes a little bit of sense there, that you can do. You know, the bigger the bookshelf is, the better it's going to sound. So there's just that to consider. I would, you know, all of the different bookshelves that are out there, and there are just so many and so many different price points that, you know, letting them pick for themselves to a certain extent. You know, this is going to be for probably bedtime casual listening, I'm guessing. I mean, I don't know. They could be watching Die Hard in there for all I know, but you know, so I don't think that you know, a whole lot of bass is going to be necessarily warranted. I think that you could buy a speaker based on how it looks. They would, as long as you buy it from one of the brands that we recommend, you'd be like, yeah, sounds pretty good, and that would be the end of that. So I think you could go that way too. Monty's new media room is under construction. When completed, it will be fully enclosed with a solid core door, 15 foot wide by 20 foot long, with a 9-foot ceiling, so 2,700 cubic feet. There is one window on one of the 15-foot walls, and the door is on one of the 20-foot walls. The exact location of the door could be moved since he's still in the construction phase, but if we consider the wall with the window to be the front, and the door will have to be somewhere in the back half, somewhere back there.
Can't be within the front half of the room closest to the window, because that's just not where the door would lead.
Got it. So he's got a 3-in-1 stand that will hold a flat panel TV, and his gear seating is a 4-seater couch, and that will all go in the front half of the room, leaving the back half open for a games area. Do we agree with having the window on the front wall behind the TV and the door in the back half of the room, or should he rotate the whole setup 180 degrees? No, I would do it just the way you got it.
I think the way you have it makes the most sense. I definitely, if you can avoid having the door in the front half of the room in the theater area, then I would go with this. Is it my voice that's coming in crazy loud or something?
No. I just heard the computer go off in the other room, so I was waiting for mine to do something. Like, I'm waiting for the big loud noise. I'm like, I'm getting PTSD over here. So he's set on getting cylinder subs. Will the PC 2000 Pros be enough for this room, or should he step up to the PC 4000s? Wow, boy, I kind of want to tell you to get the PC 4000s. I really do, but no, the PC 2000s will be just fine.
The PC 2000 Pros in 2,700 cubic of enclosed feet will be more than sufficient in output and extension capability. Yes.
I just want you to get to the 4000s, just so you're like, I only turned it up to 3.
That's right.
All right, he's got Ascend Sierra 2 speakers for the main 5. Any reason to consider upgrading into the Horizon RAL models? We just saved you a whole bunch of money on subwoofers. Yeah, there's a reason right there.
I mean, given the distance that he's going to be sitting, there's absolutely no objective reason to make that upgrade. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, because I've spent plenty of time listening to my Horizons versus my Sierra 2s. I mean, when I did the most critical listening of them that I could, I am amazed at how close the timbre match is. I would expect, because I mean, it's not identical drivers. You know, the drivers are all coming from the same companies, and it's all designed by the same speaker maker. But I was amazed at how close the timbre match is. So no, there's really no way I can say that you justifiably need the Horizon RALs in any way in the setup that you're going for.
So he expects to get a new Denon receiver. Video game consoles will be hooked up. I guess more than one. Anyways, so might as well wait a bit until the room is constructed to see if the HDMI 2.1 situation improves at all. He isn't concerned about output levels for the theater area, but if they're playing games in the back half of the room and they want to have some comfortably loud music or TV playing, do we think he'll need a separate amp? Boy, he's trying. He's like, what if I say it in this way? Will Tom say yes? No. You don't need it. Unless you're going to get his speaker, we already know what speakers he has, and the answer is no. You don't need it. I'm sorry. It's going to be plenty loud. You're going to be able to blow the doors off this place and without a separate amp. You'll be fine.
With all the money we've saved you on not buying new, more expensive speakers, not buying more expensive subwoofers, and not getting a separate amplifier, think of all the acoustic treatments you could do in here. So,
I know, really. Think about all the stuff that we actually want you to buy that you won't ask about. Think about that. So he asks, should he get his electrician to install a dedicated 20 amp circuit? Nope.
Now the thing is, I'm not against you having a circuit that is dedicated for your home theater gear. Right. I don't think it needs to be a 20 amp circuit. Just a regular 15 amp circuit is fine. But like if this whole room, like all the other outlets and the lights were all going to be on a single circuit, having a separate circuit that's for your gear, that I'm on board with. And if there's going to be some electrical being done anyway, that I would totally run. But there's no need to go 20 amp. It's not necessary in here. Nothing is using it.
But he's still in the construction phase, so he's got this option. So I would tell him, I want this one outlet to be its own circuit, or this one little group of outlets right here in the behind my gear. Yes, that makes sense, but the rest of it, no. Any strong feelings about exactly where that door should go? I think it should go on the ceiling, just to make it unique. Just to make your theater unlike anybody else's, you have to like jump down onto a mat. Think of how the fun in games in the games rooms you would have as you come crashing through the ceiling. Not in the corner.
Yeah.
In fact, I think where you have it is very not bad.
That seems to make sense to me. Yes.
Yeah. So where I want to put the subs are not exactly where you have them, but pretty close, because it doesn't seem total equidistant to front to back.
I mean, he's marked it. Yeah, it might not have been drawn exactly correctly, but he's marked it at being at the middle of the left wall, middle of the right wall. So,
and if that didn't work out for you, you could put one in the back left corner and the front right corner.
Sure.
Would work, and that's kind of why I want these things. But I also want you to put, if you're going to put your subs where they are, I want all four corners to have
bass traps.
Bass traps in them all the way up. So
that's where some of your money
another
can
reason
go.
I don't want that corner.
Yes.
The door in the corner back there.
All right.
So. Yeah, I think where you've got it looks pretty fine to me.
Yeah, I think I agree. Avoiding the corner, and then since it's going to be in the back half of the room behind the theater area anyway, I'm not terribly picky as long as it's not taking up the corner.
So he was considering going with 6 overhead speakers instead of only 4. We have any thoughts about that? I think considering all the money you were not spending an extra $150.
No, but it also means a significantly more expensive receiver to be able to do that.
I don't think he needs to buy that, though. He didn't say he was going to buy the more expensive receiver. I say put 6 speakers up there and
just leave
see
2
what
of them
comes out, and then don't use the middles at first. But you'll have top middles up there with wires going to a plate on the wall that you could use if when the price for Atmos receivers with 6 overhead speakers comes down to the point, I say put them up there. I don't say use them. I say put them up there.
Okay, I might say run the wire while the room is under construction, but I wouldn't even buy and install the speakers because he's got a single row of seats. You don't need 6 overhead speakers.
No,
you just don't. So okay, all right, I can get on board with running the wire while the room is open because might as well, but I see no reason to spend. It's considerably more to go up to the X6700H or SR8015, which are the cheapest models that would let you do 6 overhead speakers. So it's considerably more money to get either of those. And then with a single row of seats, you really don't need 6 overheads.
But you don't know. Maybe next year they'll come out with like the 4000 series will have 6 overhead speakers. You don't know.
Yeah.
They could.
True. All right, run the wire. That's the most you can do.
And if you decide to go ahead and buy the speakers, put them up there. I don't think anything. Anyways. So he's on board for a blackout shade over the window, acoustic panels on in all the typically recommended locations, and not worrying about surround backs. Any thoughts about this room that leap out at us? Other than the corner traps that I talked about, you know, I mean, Rob's going to tell you to paint the whole thing black, but I'm not going to. I might say
gray. I would be perfectly happy with gray.
But, I mean, everything looks pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean,
completely reasonable plan in here.
Good.
As far as exactly the way it's drawn in the diagram, which obviously is not meticulously to scale because it's hand-drawn.
Right.
Since you are going to stick with 5.2.4, right now the surrounds look like they're very close to 90 degrees. So I would go with the, recommended 5-speaker placement for your surround speakers, which would have them at 110, 120 degrees.
A little bit behind you.
A little bit behind you. So I think that was probably the plan anyway, but I'm just going strictly by what I see in the hand-drawn diagram. I would have the surround speakers a little bit farther back.
Excuse me. Jack bought an Outlaw Model 5000X amplifier. It has specifications for the input voltage, 1.2 volts for full rated power. He's using the pre-outs on his Marantz SR6014 receiver to send the signal. How does he adjust the output voltage of the Marantz pre-outs to make sure it's exactly what the Outlaw amp needs? Can you even do that other than adjusting the trim?
It is the trim level.
I mean, I don't know you can do it any other way.
Yeah, and so the Marantz has pre-outs that are capable of putting out just north of 4 volts. So you can definitely put out enough voltage to get this thing going to full rated power. No question about that. Now, one of the criticisms that Gene and Amir have leveled at the analog pre-outs is that if you raise them high enough, they start to have a little bit of distortion that comes out of those pre-outs because the actual speaker amplifiers are still connected. Yeah, that starts to happen at about 1.7 volts, and the most you'll ever be outputting is 1.2, so you're well below that threshold, so that is not a concern whatsoever. So ultimately, you just need to run Odyssey, because it is going to set your trem levels so that with your master volume dial at proper reference volume, that is the amount you will get. The trim level might actually be a negative number that really wouldn't be out of the question here because you've got plenty of range available in those preamp outputs. So don't be shocked if you end up with a negative number on your trim level, because this is a pretty sensitive amp. 1.2 volts for full rated power is actually kind of low for a lot of amplifiers. So it's a sensitive amp. That means it has a healthy gain stage in the external amplifier itself, and therefore a negative number on your trim level is probably to be expected. But all you have to do is run Odyssey, and you'll be good.
There you go. Carl says there's all kind of chatter online about cassette tapes making some sort of comeback. Is that for real? Is that some sort of hipster thing? I don't know where you're reading that. I haven't read it. But,
it's been in the zeitgeist as of late.
Whatever. Go ahead, make them come back. I don't care. I'm not going to buy them.
I mean, it literally started.
I remember how bad they sounded.
Yeah, it literally started as a joke, which was when vinyl legitimately started. They love to say the percentage gains year over year. This is what percent more vinyl we sold this, because you were starting from a really small number, so the percentage was really high.
We 200% sold. Right. Yeah, we sold 5.5.
5,000% gain. But yeah, once that started happening, people started making the joke like, "Oh, what's going to happen? Cassette next?" Because everything it's like fashion, right? Everything cycles back. So it started out as a joke, and now in some corners, it's actually being legitimate. No, don't go back to cassettes. Good grief, so stupid. So
knock yourselves out, you guys. I mean, all you youngsters who think that we had it so good back in the day with our cassettes that we could record things off off of other things. You don't remember what it was like. You can only play them a certain number of times before something happened. They started to stretch or staticky, and
people are reminiscing. You made the mixtape for your girlfriend or the person you wanted.
You can make a mix CD for your girlfriend.
I mean, I guess it's not quite as, wonderful to just give them a Spotify playlist, right? And it's nothing physical to that. So, all right, that's fine if you want to do it that way. But I mean, I actually heard, I think it was on one of those Audioholics videos with Anthony Grimani where he was actually like, oh, there's actually some, like technical things about cassette. It's not as bad as we thought it was. Knock it off. Knock it off. It has nothing to do with quality.
Shut up. You heard me say shut up? Shut up. Cassettes suck. Yeah. I was there. Vinyl sucks too, but cassettes really suck. Like you can't even really argue about it all that much. It's fragile. It breaks. It gets tangled. I mean, ugh. The only thing I could say about cassette tapes that I miss is I had a Sonic Youth album that I purchased, and on one, it was like a double, like the cassette was like a double link cassette. So normally a full album took both sides, right?
Yeah.
This one, the full album took one side.
Okay.
And then if you were, no matter where you were in the album, if you exited or if you had the ability to just switch sides, because some cassette players could do that. But if not, if you took the tape out, turned it over and put it back in,
I see.
Wherever you were listening, you were now in the same spot, but you were listening to it backwards.
Oh, okay.
So that is about the only thing that cassettes can do that you can't really do with a CD or something else. But that was the one thing that I was like, this is really cool. It's totally pointless after you do it the first time, but it's very cool. So I guess if you're into that backward masking stuff, you could check them out really easily. But other than that, Patrick says small, low and loud, or inexpensive. Pick two. That's what we say when it comes to subs, right? Well, Patrick needs a small and under $300 or under subwoofer, so he's willing to give up the low and loud for his home office. Do we have any suggestions? DIY it would be the. It would also be ugly. I mean, you could get like one of those Dayton kits.
You could just get a Dayton. I mean, a sub 1000 or a sub 1200. Although they're not that small. Like particularly the sub 1200 it's not that small. The sub 1000 could definitely be a consideration. Yeah. And along the very same lines, Monoprice. If you just look up the entire Monoprice subwoofer collection outside of the monolith ones, because those are not small. But yeah, if you look at the whole subwoofer collection over there at Monoprice, there's certainly some options there. Again, similar to the Daytons, the regular box-looking ones are not as small. Check the specs, because like the 12-inch, just the Monoprice 12-inch was like $250 or $230, I think. The regular box-sized one. I think it's like 15 by 18 by 19. It's not really what I consider all that small. So they do have something kind of cool over at Monoprice. Dayton has these two, but only in a 10-inch size. Monoprice has an 8, 10, and 12-inch option of these very low-profile subwoofers, and the 12-inch model is only $200. So this is something that can legitimately just slide under just about any seat, and in fact, it has brackets on it where you can wall mount it. You can wall mount the subwoofer, and it's this low-profile flat thing for $200. And yeah, you can get a 12-inch version of it. So. Yeah. I can. There's a
SW15.
Yes.
Yeah,
there's a 15-inch version too. That's not small. It's not small.
It's not small. It's 18 by 21 by 23, just about, and it's not a small one, but it's
don't be fooled by the price.
$300.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's got a 15-inch cone in it, man. It's big, but I mean, it's hard. So. It's hard to find a subwoofer that is $300 or less and also small, okay? Because you can find woofers, basically, bass modules, and they're all over Amazon. And it's just you have to be careful with how you read the reviews. That's what it comes down to there. It's just being really careful about how you read those reviews, because a lot of them are like, oh my God, it's crushing my room. I'm like, no, it's not. it really totally isn't. This is the first sub you've ever had, the first bass module you've ever had. So
yeah, no,
you have to be real careful about how you read the reviews. But in your case, since you want something small and cheap, you just want something that's not going to distort. And just give you a little bit more bass. And I like Rob's suggestion of the little thin thing too, because you can kind of slide that under.
Yeah, low profile. Yeah, you can become your foot stand under your desk.
A little foot massager.
Yeah.
Mike, Mike says, starting with a car audio question. Mike has a 2014 Subaru Forester with just the stock audio system in it. So you're a grandparent? Because I think that you have to be a grandparent to own a Forester or a Subaru. Either one. Anyways, sorry. He's got a Diamond Audio Hex S500, which are 5-inch, I guess, drivers, and S600, which are, you guessed it, 6-inch speakers on hand that he plans to install. The factory head unit appears to use a Harman Kardon amp rated at 650 watts total. Will a new external amplifier be needed, or will that stock amplifier get the job done? I don't know anything about car audio, but
yeah,
is he just popping out old speakers and putting in new speakers?
Well, not quite, because these Diamond Audio ones actually have the tweeter separate from the woofer, which the stock ones is the typical thing you see in car audio, which is the concentric design or coaxial design, at least, where the tweeter is in the middle of the woofers. So this one would require some modification. You'd have to have a mounting position for the tweeters that are separate, and they actually have an external crossover. So you plug the amplifier of your car audio system into the crossover of these Diamond Audio speakers, and then that separates what goes to the tweeter and to the woofer.
I mean, wouldn't you look at the impedance that your old speakers were at?
I mean, they're all 4 ohm. There's nothing that's not going to be 4 ohm in car audio. So that's not the issue. And then I looked up the specs for the Diamond Audio Hex S500 and S600, and those are saying the recommended amplifier power for the S500s is 100 watts per channel and 120 watts per channel for the S600s. So, I mean, the amplifier that's already built into the car, 4-channel amplifier, because you got the 2 channels up front and 2 channels in back. So 650 watts total means it's, I don't know, about 160 watts per channel that it could supply. So just objectively speaking, in terms of the wattage that's available with what's already built in, having enough channels, there's no particular reason why you should need to replace that amplifier. That's as far as the specs goes, you should be good to go.
All right, so for his phone, he uses a Pixel 5, as do I. It doesn't have a headphone jack, but it comes with a dongle, which is I swear they are meant to dissolve the minute they hit a surface. So as you drop them, they just turn to dust like Thanos snap. They just
wonderful
gone. So I've got a bag of them now. I just bought a whole bunch from Amazon. So he's using it with a pair of Audio-Technica ATH-M50X headphones, which I also have, but not here. Would he benefit from connecting a separate portable headphone amplifier, such as the AudioQuest Dragonfly? He's using lossless FLAC files, not just lossy streaming. The question you would have to... So first of all, the ATH-M50s are not a hard headphone to drive. So that's not the issue. The question I would ask you, and I haven't used the dongle like in forever, but I connected it up. The last time I did it, I used my larger Oppo planar magnetic speaker headphones with them, and I didn't notice that I was running out of headroom. They got loud enough with those, and so headroom shouldn't be an issue for you. The question you should ask yourself is, am I noticing any sort of noise or background hiss with or anything else that might be going on? I would imagine that you're not. So I would say I would say no, you would not need an AudioQuest Dragonfly. I mean, you could get one and you could test it out and you could tell us. But I think that objectively, you're not going to hear a difference.
No, there shouldn't be any need for this. If you were coming with some very different headphones, really difficult to drive headphones, then I might be a little bit more on board with this.
Hi-fi, man, anything.
Yeah, except for their high efficiency one. They have their one or two high efficiency models. But yeah, no, this with Audio-Technica ATH-M50s, there should be absolutely no need for this. Yeah, that's about the end of that one.
I mean, I don't know what else to
I don't know what else to say. I can't come up with a justification for it. The noise floor is not a problem coming out of the Pixel 5 using the dongle. The amount of power is more than ample for those headphones. So that's it.
So for a pair of outdoor speakers, he's probably getting the Yamaha AW350s that we often recommend, possibly the Klipsch 6.5-inch outdoor speakers if the Yamahas are out of stock. He does not want to run speaker wire into the house. So is there a separate wireless amplifier that would let him use Bluetooth from his phone and also connect via Wi-Fi to the rest of his system in the house? Rob?
Yeah, so here's the here's the little bit of a tricky thing because I mean, first of all, yes, there are.
There's
however,
lots of them, but the outdoor part is the part that's got me stumped.
Yeah, they're not outdoor rated. So this, like any of these amplifiers, these wireless amplifiers, yeah, like if your porch isn't covered, they're not rated for that type of thing. They're not waterproof. They're not weather resistant. So they need to be protected just from the elements in some way. But the other main factor is, what is the rest of your system? If you want this to integrate over Wi-Fi with the rest of the things that you have in the house, then do you have Denon amplifiers in there? Well, then you're going to want to get the Hios amp, which can do this, but you're going to want to get the Hios amp. If you've got Yamaha receivers, then you're going to want to get the MusicCast amp, which can do this. If you have Sonos, you're going to want to get the Sonos amp. So if you already have any sort of other wireless music system that you're using in your house, just get the little amp version that connects to that system, because they all offer one. If you just want something that's standalone and can do all the things and works nicely, SVS has their Prime Wireless sound base. All of these ones, whether it's the Sonos amp, the Hios amp, the MusicCast amp, the Prime Wireless sound base from SVS, they're all in that $500 price range. Nobody's really doing anything different as far as pricing goes for any of these devices. So that's about all I can really say, because I don't know what the rest of your house is already using. And I'd go with whatever matches if you want it to match up, and all of them can go ahead and take a Bluetooth signal standalone.
Right. The problem is that none of them are weatherproof.
None of them are weatherproof. Yeah.
Nobody really makes an amp that's meant to go outside.
Not like that.
No. Chris has chosen an Apple TV 4K as his device for streaming video. His display is a JVC NX7 projector. We've recommended the Apple TV 4K and noted how, by and large, it seems to do the best job of providing the highest quality audio and video across the majority of the services. We've also said how that we like that it automatically switches frame rates and automatically switches between SDR and HDR. But when the NX7 goes blank during a frame rate or SDR versus HDR change, it takes quite a while for the image to reappear. That's a JVC problem, not the other way around. But it's not as bad as what people reported with JVC's older projector models, but it's still around 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds sometimes. It's enough to make you wonder if maybe something went wrong, and a bit distracting because the video it will already be in progress when the image shows back up. So specifically for his JVC NX7, what would we suggest as the best video output settings for his Apple TV 4K?
Yeah, this is a little bit tricky because I mean I totally get the usability side of it, where because it can be frustrating because by default. I mean, quickly, what I would normally recommend with an Apple TV 4K is setting it at its default out to be 4K SDR. All right, which I know is confusing because if you plug it into an HDR display or even more so a Dolby Vision display, right away it asks you, hey, do you want to turn on Dolby Vision? Hey, do you want to turn on HDR? And of course, you would think the answer would be yes, but if you do so, it will always be in HDR or always be in Dolby Vision. So the normal one I say is set it to 4K SDR and then activate its match frame rate and match dynamic range settings, which is what lets it switch between 60 hertz and 24 hertz and lets it switch between SDR and HDR automatically. Now, the thing is, the menu is always in 60 hertz standard dynamic range. That's what the menu will always be. And then almost no videos from any of the streaming services are in that. Almost all videos, if they're SDR, they're 24 hertz or they're HDR. So that switching happens frequently, right? Every time you back out to the menu, you're faced with this 10-second, sometimes 15 or 20-second long blanking on the projector. And I totally get that as being a frustration. So there's kind of a choice to make, right? The unfortunate thing is with the Apple TV, you don't really have any method of setting it to 24 hertz and just staying there. If you did that, the menus would look all choppy and they wouldn't animate very well, but you could suffer through that, and then it would always be. But there's no way to do that. The only thing you can have it stuck at is 60 hertz all the time, and you do that simply by turning off the match frame rate option. I'm not super keen on that because that means the vast majority of your content, you're back to the judder, right? The 3/2 cadence judder. That's just going to be there. But to avoid the blanking, it's really all you can do. I'm not against leaving it in HDR mode all the time because the menus might look a little bit weird, but That's the menus. It's not what you're watching. In terms of if you're looking at a piece of streaming video that is SDR, but the Apple TV is just putting it into an HDR container and sending that out to your JVC, it does a fine job of that. It does a perfectly fine job of putting the SDR video into an HDR container. And then your JVC also does a really good job of frame by frame tone mapping. So leaving it in HDR all the time, I think makes sense. For this projector, but the frame rate thing, I'm like, oh, I wish there were a way to lock it to 24 instead of locking it to 60. I guess you could get an NVIDIA Shield instead, which does that. You can leave it locked at 24 HDR all the time, and never switch out of that. So that could be a consideration. This could be an instance where the NVIDIA Shield is a nicer experience than the Apple TV if you don't want to go through any switching and blanking.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Could a HD Fury also solve this problem? One of the HD Fury's things?
For 60 hertz to 24 hertz conversion, I'm sure the Diva can do it. The Diva must be able to do it. It's a $450 device.
There's another one that I looked up today that was doing stuff.
Frame rate conversion?
I don't know if it was. It definitely did the
HDR to SDR.
HDR to SDR, which was the it was the 4K Vertex squared.
Vertex can do it. Okay. I mean,
I don't know if it can do. I don't know if it can do it. It can do the up down.
Okay.
SDR, HDR, all that, and it works with eARC.
Yeah.
This one.
I mean, both of which are more expensive than just buying an NVIDIA Shield. So
right.
So that might honestly be the best solution here, because the Shield, I mean, ironically, the thing I don't like about the Shield is that it doesn't automatically switch between frame rates. But in your instance, where it would be preferable to just have the frame rate stuck at one value at all times, it absolutely does that, and you can choose that value to be, in your case, 23.976 hertz, because it actually lets you choose either the integer 24 or the actual 23.976 that video really comes in. So, yeah, that might be the way to go, NVIDIA Shield.
Okay, there we go. Daniel. Daniel has an Onkyo RZ910 receiver. It tops out at 7 speakers, and he was running a... Sorry, what?
Yeah, RZ810. You said 9.
What did I say?
9.
Oh, 810, whatever. I rounded up. He was running a 7.1 setup until he bought dual SVS subs. He wants to expand to a full Atmos configuration, so he's thinking he would really like to have 6 overhead speakers instead of just 4, so 7.2.6. Both Marantz and Denon have a 13-channel models, but they're expensive.
They are.
Is there some way he could add a second receiver to his RZ810, keep his RZ810 running the 7.2 portion, and then the second receiver running the 6 overheads, maybe? The answer to that question is no. What you could do is you could buy 2 more receivers.
Well, even then, it wouldn't work, because your initial receiver has to be able to output at least 4 overheads.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You would buy a new receiver that can do 4 overheads.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then a cheaper receiver that was equivalent to what your Onkyo is. So your Onkyo would end up doing the left side of your theater,
sure,
and the other new receiver that was like that Onkyo would do the right side of your theater,
okay,
and your new big receiver that can, like a Denon 4000 series or 3800 series or whatever, could do the 7.2.4 that you're looking for.
Yeah, what we're referring to here is if you have a receiver that can do 7.2.4, you take the top front and top rear left, just the top front and top rear left pre-outs, and feed those into a ProLogic receiver. And now that ProLogic receiver can create a top middle. It's actually going to be like the center speaker output.
You're going to call it the center.
Yeah, because it's taking the top front, it'll consider the front left, and the top rear, it'll consider the front right, and then it...
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. Really, and then it
however you
matrixes a center in between, which becomes your top middle. But then you'd need to do that again for the right-hand side of your top front and top rear right speakers, and then matrix out a top middle right speaker with a third ProLogic AV receiver. So it's a 3 AV receiver solution to do this, but you have to start with a receiver that can do 7.2.4. So you definitely cannot just add some not too expensive AV receiver to your RZ810 and have it run 6 overheads. There's just no way to do that. Plus, all the sounds that should be overhead would still be coming out of your 7.1 base layer speakers, because it doesn't discard those sounds just because they're Atmos sounds. All those sounds are be put into your 7.2 speakers that the RZ810 is still running. So at the end of all that, if you desperately want 6 overheads, getting a Denon X6700H is probably the way to go about doing it. Even just for convenience, if nothing else.
I mean, just like we talked about before, putting 6 speakers up there is no problem.
Right.
Getting 6 speakers to make sound is for right now.
It is.
But what I would consider doing is buying the 7.2.4 receiver that you want, and even if it can't power all the speakers, well, you have an extra receiver just sitting around anyway, so use that to power whatever speakers that it
just
can't
as an
power.
amplifier. Yeah.
And then, instead of buying like this top of the line Denon or Marantz, or I mean, if you really want to go all in, the monoprice HT whatever it is 1 processor, it must be HTP processor, right? HTP 1. Anyways, I would just sit on this for like 2 or 3 years. Just enjoy your 7.2.4 for 2 or 3 years. Wait for prices on the Denon and the Marantzes to come down to a reasonable spot where you can take and buy something that can power natively, or do all the stuff for the 6 overheads, and then treat yourself then. I mean, that's what I would do. But because when they do finally come down in price and I get something that can do 6 overheads, I'm going to turn my surround backs into top whatever they call them.
Rear heights.
Greg. Last week we discussed Greg's theater with his 3 love seats from HT Market. The back row is 2 love seats side by side that basically go wall to wall. And when he tried listening to an entire movie back there, he found the surround back speakers too distracting, so he's decided to nix them, but potentially move those speakers to the rear corners. Since the surrounds and surround backs have significantly different sensitivity ratings, we said that wouldn't be a good idea to wire them in series or for use as 2 pairs of side surrounds. Their volume levels would be different, but he got him thinking. He's got an old Onkyo receiver on hand, so could he power 1 pair of surrounds with his Denon that is handling the 5.2.4 system, and then connect the surround pre-outs to the Onkyo? The Onkyo would then just be acting as an external amp for his second pair of surrounds, but he could use its volume dial to get that second pair of speakers to match, correct?
Yes, that'll work.
Yeah, that would work. So you would basically, because most receivers, the pre-outs are hot no matter what.
That's right.
There's something there going no matter what. So if you don't hook speakers into your speaker terminals, speaker wire terminals, then the pre-outs work. But if you do power speakers with the internal amps, it doesn't shut off the pre-outs. The pre-outs are still going out.
That's right.
So what you would do is you would level match. You would have your Denon or whatever do all of the Odyssey stuff. Then your second pair of surround backs, you would just turn your Denon off, but you would do something to make it not play sound, and then maybe just turn the just. I don't know how would you. Oh no! Okay, wait. You would just turn the Denon off, turn the Onkyo on, and then have the Onkyo level match the side surrounds in the back, and then turn the Denon back on, and now everything is it will be level matched. Now, whatever Odyssey is doing to your side surrounds in the front, it's also going to be doing to your side surrounds in the back, which is not the way you want that to happen.
Well,
necessarily.
I mean, they're playing together, so it's giving a summed EQ of whatever the heck the sound is from the 2 different side surround speakers playing together.
So I guess the order of operations is level match with the Onkyo, then turn everything on, and then run Odyssey. Yeah. And that way Odyssey takes into account all 4 of those speakers.
You could even just play the trim level pink noise out of the surround channel individually and just kind of approximate it so that, the one in the back doesn't sound grossly louder or quieter than the side surround that's a little bit farther forward. So that doesn't have to be super complicated. I would want could you do something crazy? Could you put both of the Deftechs on the left and put both of the JBLs on the right and just have wildly different trim levels?
It's just to make everybody crazy.
I mean, I don't know what your
you could do it that way too. I actually was thinking that. I was like, nah, it's just let's.
I mean, I don't know what your timbre would be like, how well the EQ could actually change the timbre of the speakers, but I mean, you could put.
You could, right? So you could wire them. You could wire your left side in series and your right side in series, and then and then
both def
just
techs
keep
on
the
the
same
left.
Speakers. They're just two different speakers.
Both JPLs on the right. Is some wildly different trim levels in your surround left versus your surround right channel. Could do it.
Right. The problem. So that would allow Odyssey to have the best control over making your left side and your right side sound as similar as possible. With having two different speakers on each side, any change it makes to the front speaker, it's also making to the back speaker, which is a problem. So, I mean, it's just we're really trying to shoehorn these speakers in.
We
here.
are indeed.
And I don't know what's the better solution, but
I mean, I think the best solution is to just nix the surround back speakers and forget they ever existed entirely.
That's probably the one that I would go with.
Right.
But if you absolutely must put these things in here, which one would I opt for? I just don't know. I just don't know.
You can try them all.
Try them all. So if you were to do it, would he wire that second pair of surrounds to the front left and right speaker binding posts on the Onkyo? And the answer is yes. That's what you would do, because that's the only way they'll make any sound.
Yeah, we aren't worried about the labels. That you would just have a stereo signal coming in. So you'd have the pre-outs, the surround left and the surround right pre-outs of your Denon. Those would just be going into any pair of red and white analog inputs on your Onkyo. The Onkyo, you just put into direct mode. You don't want it doing anything. The only thing you want is the volume control. And now it is the front, left, and right speaker terminals that are outputting that signal. So don't worry about the label. That's just where the signals are coming out of.
Paul says when he first started planning his current home theater, he had a simple 5.1 setup in mind. That was 17 years ago.
Yeah.
But today... But he says, but after listening to us all the time and reading the chatter online, please don't read online, except if it's AV Gadgets, in which case that guy's brilliant. He wound up with a 5.2.4 configuration.
That's what he's got.
That's what he's got now. Okay, not what he wants, but that's what he's got. He's in a 12 by 23 foot room. As time goes on, he keeps hearing how, since he has plenty of room behind the seats, maybe surround backs would actually make sense for him. Maybe he should try 6 overhead speakers instead of 4. And then there's Rob getting all excited about front wides. Just how many speakers does he need? You need 1. Technically, a single mono speaker will get you sound, and that's what you need.
You definitely
Everything
need
else
at
is
least
just icing.
One. Yes, yeah.
Is it all employed by the home theater industry to make you feel as though no matter how many speakers you have, you always need 2 or 4 or 6 more? Yes, that is exactly what it is.
There's definitely some of that going on. There's no question about that.
Okay, so first of all, chatter online is your problem, and also Rob is also your problem. So don't listen to either of those things. But your room is 12 by 23. I don't think wides make sense. Probably because your room is not that wide to begin with. It could, but if you think about what front wides are actually supposed to.
If you're sitting fairly far back, which you could be in a 23-foot long room, and then if you do have 5, because you got 5 speaker setups, so if those are at the 120-degree mark, the spread between your surrounds and your fronts, that could potentially be quite a distance. And wouldn't it be nice to have a speaker in between your surrounds and your fronts? Those wide positions just fill in that gap over there.
The answer is no. No. The answer to that question
11-foot by 12-foot room, and I've got them.
I know, but you're weird.
I
and
am
you also
indeed.
have PC 4000s.
That's
true.
true.
With the upgraded amplifiers, because that's what you needed. No. So, that question you need to ask yourself before you start listening to any of this other stuff online is, do I feel like there's a hole in the sound someplace in my home theater? Am I sitting here in my theater, and as things go around the room, there's a dead spot? If there is, then maybe we can talk about what you need. But front wides are basically supposed to essentially fill in, like Rob said, fill in that space between the front speakers and the side surrounds, or really control that first reflection that is right there. Is kind of where they go. They go right in that first reflection
absolutely
point.
do. Yeah.
And you dampen it down as much as you can, and then you put a speaker there so that you get what you're supposed to be getting from there, not something that's just reflected off the wall. Surround backs, again, for most people, you put surround backs that are like, I assume they're doing something. Kind of sounds the same as it did before.
Yeah, I mean, 23-foot long room. You almost certainly do have space behind you where
right.
It's not out of the question that it could make sense.
Not out of the question, but are you thinking to yourself, there's never a sound behind me? And I kind of feel like sometimes there should be. If you haven't had those thoughts, then the answer is you probably don't need it. Now, can you have it? Yeah. 6 overhead speakers. We already talked about this a number of times on this podcast today, but you've got 1 row of seats.
Yeah.
Do you need 6 overhead speakers? I mean, you don't. Just like you don't need a center channel if you sit directly in front of the TV and you can create a phantom center with your front, left, and right speakers. So do you need an overhead top middle? No. I mean, can you get one? Yes. You might have to buy 2 more receivers to make it happen, or a really expensive receiver to make it happen, but you can make it happen, but you don't really need to. So none of these things are necessary. So do you feel that pressure or whatever? I mean, if you're not noticing a deficiency in your theater, why are you trying to fix a problem that doesn't seem to exist? It's not like subwoofer. Like, this is not like having not having some bass and not realizing what it sounds like. This is a distinctive lack of sound as sounds are panning around your room. You should be able to pick this out fairly easily. It should be something a question you should be able to answer for yourself. If the answer to all those questions is no, then go with God and live with what you got. It probably sounds pretty good.
If somebody comes to me and says, I want a really good home theater experience, my thought is, I want them to have 5.2. That's, to me, 5.2 is where you go, this is way better than TV speakers. This is better than just a stereo pair of speakers. This is a truly worthwhile experience to have 5.2 for a really good home theater, and you can stop there. If you get to 5.2 and it's set up well, you can stop there. So, in all things, do you actually need 5.2 to hear what's going on in the movie? No, but to me, that is the value. That, you get to 5.2 and you can really justify every step of that, and then beyond that, it's all a little bit of fluff.
I would agree with that. That's that the big differences you get, and I don't know if you have any other hobbies, but if you're really knowledgeable about a hobby, you know that you get 90% of the way there spending, 10% of the money. And then the other 90% of the money is just, that super tweaky high-end part of the stuff. You can make a cup of coffee with a $10 machine, but you can spend $2,000 on the machine that will make a really good cup of coffee. But is it, worth that much more? Well, I mean, if you're into coffee, it is. So he bought 4 of the monoprice in-ceiling speakers we've often recommended. He followed our advice. They're about 4.5 feet in front and 4.5 feet behind and pointed straight down. But we've said before how high frequencies are more directional. Won't those sounds be directed into empty parts of his room this way? He wants those helicopters and alien ships overhead to sound accurate. So he just can't shake the feeling that the overhead speakers ought to be aimed at the seats. How does that not make the most sense? Okay, so this is how it doesn't make the most sense, because the person who mixed the sound into those overhead speakers didn't have them pointed at his head. That's how it makes the most sense. You want to recreate what the sound designer had. Okay, the sound designer was told by Dolby to put overhead speakers, a certain distance in front of him, him or her, and a certain distance behind him or her, and pointed straight down. And that's what they did. So therefore, that's what you should do. And if you want to argue with that based on logic, then the logic falls apart when you realize that you are changing how the sounds were mixed. Therefore, you are changing the experience. So it's not become better by pointing them at you. It's actually going to become less like what the person who was listening to the original mix heard, and therefore less like what they had intended.
Yeah, they are supposed to be, atmospheric. That is where the Atmos name was derived from. So they're supposed to be considerably more diffuse than what a lot of people want. And I mean, look, I don't blame anybody. It's the same with surround speakers, right? Some people are like, I want to notice my surround speakers as much as possible so that I can really, really tell whenever they make a sound. But that's not really the way it was meant to sound. That's not how it sounded in the mixing and mastering process. They were more diffuse, a little less localizable, not really meant to draw your attention away from the front, from the screen where you're watching the action happening. They're just supposed to envelop you and give you that greater sense of atmosphere. So if you can think of it that way, then yes, you are getting things as intended. Now, if you're like, look, I hate it, I know the speakers are up there and I just want to notice them more, then if you angle them and aim them at you, what are we going to do to stop you? That is okay. But start with them straight down, get a little bit used to it, and maybe you'll find that, oh, okay, that actually makes sense. Last question, if you can do it.
Yeah, I think this is this the last question?
This is the last one on the list.
All right. Andrew. So Gik has some YouTube videos posted in which they make a slightly unusual recommendation for front speaker placement. They describe how lower frequencies basically radiate in a spherical pattern outward from the regular speaker, so that creates boundary reflections and sound wave interference. The farther away from the walls, the better, because that lowers the frequencies at which problematic wave interference takes place. They say greater than 4 feet from the front and side walls would be ideal, but they recognize that many people don't have that kind of space. So they say if your speakers have to be closer to the front wall, put them really close, literally as close as to the front walls as you can, basically on wall. Then treat all around them with absorption as thick as possible. They posit that this approach gets you closer to a baffle wall installment. So either go really far away from the front wall or really, really close. Avoid what seems like the common and typical 1 foot to 3 foot distances. What do we think? So that whole baffle wall thing, what they're trying to do here is put a whole bunch of absorption right there and then put it right, because they're right. The longer frequencies wrap around the speaker cabinet, and that we talk about how bass is omnidirectional. This is why, that wraps around the speaker cabinet. The waves are so long, blah, 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 blah. So by pushing the speaker up against the back wall, you're basically, as the sound waves wrap around the cabinet, they're going to get absorbed by that wall right there. As maybe mathematically correct as this might be, I mean, I didn't do the math, so I don't know, or as maybe theoretically correct as this might be, I think the reality is it's just not something that anybody's really going to do. Most speaker manufacturers will tell you that, as far away from walls as you can get, but at least a couple of feet. I think, 2-3 feet is what they kind of recommend, and that's, pretty good. And then again, we always suggest treating first reflection points behind you, and then behind the speakers is usually, side walls behind the speakers is usually something we recommend. And this is because we're trying to catch that wave that's coming back behind the speaker and hitting the wall. I don't really see any reason to do this, especially if you have a rear-ported speaker.
That's
I don't think
a
this
concern.
Is a terribly good idea, because the whole idea behind the rear port is that it adds to the bass that's coming. It adds to the bass. It wraps around the cabinet as well. But if you fire it directly into a panel, that's not going to happen. So you've just effectively killed that part of, which was part of the design of the speaker. So it's a little bit speaker design specific. It's also, like I said, just not something I think many people are going to do. So, it's easy to recommend because, they're like, well, might as well.
Well,
do it anyway.
So I mean, mathematically, what's going on here is, the farther that you pull the speaker away from the wall, the lower the frequency where you're going to have problematic wave interference. You're going to have wave interference no matter where the speaker is in the room, but problematic wave interference is going to happen at a lower and lower frequency the farther away the speaker is from the wall. So when you bring the speaker really close to the wall, so it's not on wall, it's not in wall, it's not actually a baffle wall yet, because even if you have some 4 or 6 inch thick insulation that's installed all around your tower speaker that's been pushed against the wall, most tower speakers are still going to be 10 or 12 inches deep. So they're still proud of that insulation on the front wall. So you don't actually have a baffle wall with this approach, which means that the problematic wave interference has now been pushed to a higher frequency with the speaker pushed right back against the wall. Now it's going to be happening up around 250, 300 hertz or something like that, maybe 200 hertz, depending on how physically deep your speaker is that's been pushed against the wall. So the notion here is that, okay, we've pushed it up into a higher frequency range, one that we can absorb with the panels that we sell. Now, look, for the by and large, I think Geek's advice on most things is really, really good, but they are a company that exclusively sells acoustic treatments. So when they give you a suggestion that requires covering your entire wall with panels now, you know, maybe that benefits them financially a little bit. So, but I mean, the reasoning kind of makes sense, but it only works if now you treat the whole front wall as you would with a baffle wall. So the idea is that, okay, now the problematic frequencies are happening 200 to 300 hertz, and that's something our panels can address. Whereas if the speaker is, let's say, 2 feet away from the wall, well, now the problematic frequency is happening not so low that it's basically exclusively being handled by your subwoofers, and not so high that panels do a really good job of absorbing that, right? If you're in that like 125 hertz range, you know, it's kind of in between, and it can be difficult for a panel to absorb that, and then the subwoofer that's not within the subwoofer crossover range yet. So there's some logic behind it, but I think the reality of, okay, I can't bring my speakers well away from the wall, so I'm going to push them right against the wall and cover the entire wall in 6 or 8 inch thick insulation. I'm like, I don't know if people are doing that. If you've got a small room for budgetary reasons, do you have the money to cover your entire wall in 6 inch thick insulation, right? I'm like, realistically, so I'm worried that somebody is going to say, oh, Geek said if you can't pull the speaker 3.5, 4 feet away from the wall, push it right against the wall, but they kind of forget about the now you have to cover the entire wall part of that, and they just push the speaker against the wall and think that that's better. No, that isn't better without the treatment. If the wall is bare, that is worse. You are going to notice 250 hertz, 300 hertz interference much more than you would notice 125 hertz interference, because we just get worse and worse at hearing things the lower you go in frequency. You're going to pick it out at 300 hertz. You might have trouble hearing it at 100 or 125. So I still stay with the general advice of, if you don't have on-wall or in-wall speakers, pull them as far away from the wall as you can. If you are less than about 3 feet, I do want you to treat as thick as you can behind the speaker there, but you don't have to treat the entire wall now. You can sort of just have a panel as thick as you can, directly behind and directly beside the speaker. Yeah, I think that's the totality of the answer. So they're not wrong, but if you do it, you have to treat the whole wall now like it were a baffle wall.
Right. Which, I mean, they'll be happy to sell you all.
They certainly will. It makes sense from their end.
So, yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, technically correct,
sure,
in a lot of ways, but then, you know, it's like why I don't like to give suggestions on recommendations for speakers that are more directional for people who have reflective rooms, because people will take that and just hear this is a directional speaker, therefore I don't need to treat my room anymore, which is not the case. You know, it's like, this will not be as bad as a speaker with really wide dispersion
in certain regards.
Right, but it's still you still need to do all the things. So I've been having elbow issues just because I climb and I'm really hard on my body in a lot of ways. And I went to the physical therapist or the doctor or whatever, and he's like, okay, well, there's solutions. The first solution is you just rest it for a long time and it'll probably get better. Like, I'm not going to do that because I'm a climber and that's what I do. Like, okay, well, then you need to take it easy climbing, and then you could do physical therapy. That's one. He goes, or I can give you a shot which will help the pain, but it won't help it get any better, but you need to do physical therapy. I'm like, okay, what's the third option? He goes, I could do surgery and then scrape out this and reattach that and do all this stuff. but then you do physical therapy. I'm like, so all of it's just physical therapy? He goes, yeah, it's just physical therapy. I'm like, okay. So it's like, it's the same thing here. Like, you know, we could do all these things to fix this problem, but the problem really is that things are bouncing off the wall, and you need to fix that problem by
you can't get away of the physics of the sound waves at low frequencies are non-directional.
So
they're going
don't
to
tell me
reflect
about your
off the
electrostats, about how they're super directive and therefore you don't need to treat your room. You still need to treat your room. Don't tell me about how you move the speaker against the back wall and therefore lower, you know, raise that frequency, and then you put a 6-inch panel behind it. You still need to treat the rest of the room. You know, it just treating the room is a non-optional part of, like, don't even buy speakers before you start. You know what I mean? If you really want to do home theater right, step one, make your room as ready for, think of it as like having a baby. The speakers are the baby, okay? You don't go to the hospital, get a baby, and come home and say, okay, now where are we going to put this thing? You know, that's not how things work. You go and you get the room ready. You buy the crib and all the stupid toys and the things that you think you need that you're never going to use, but you'll buy them anyways, or you get them from. You do that to your home theater. You go around your home theater, like, okay, where am I going to sit? I'm going to sit here. Okay, now where am I going to put my speakers? I'm going to put them here. Okay, so where do I need to put my room treatments? I put them there, and you get all your room treatments up, and you do all this stuff, because too many times people are like, I bought these speakers and they sound like crap. What do I do? What speakers should I buy? I'm like, well, your room's garbage, so who knows? Go fix the room, then listen to your speakers again, and then tell me whether or not they're still garbage, because that's the most important part. So, you know, your room's contributing so much to this that, you know, saying, you know, oh, if you push the speakers back and do all this, yeah, theoretically, yeah. It still doesn't. I mean, if all you did was take your speakers, push them up against the back wall, and then treat around that speaker with 6-inch panels, your room, you have not touched the rest of the room. It's not going to help. You know, it's going to help that one specific issue, but then it doesn't address any of the other stuff that's going on in your room. So deal with your room first, and then start worrying about what speakers and everything else you have. All right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Benjamin and Jason for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and leaving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 123 patrons over at patreon.com.
For sure, Benjamin and Jason, thank you for the PayPal donations, and patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. For anyone who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, 123 patrons over there, and thank you all very much for the financial support.
We want to thank Daniel for talking us up to SVS, Paul for talking us up to Monoprice and to RSL, for her for being an all-around cool dude, and for Mike, Kris, Daniel, and Clara for sending us notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going.
That is right. Daniel, thanks for talking us up to SVS. Paul, thanks for talking us up to Monoprice and RSL. Herb, thanks for being so awesome and letting our listeners know that, yes, you can order a UMIC 1, but there'll probably be about a 1-month wait. Let's just keep that in mind, but there you go. That's the way shipping is going these days. And Mike, Kris, Daniel, and Clara, thank you very much for the notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. Thank you to everyone who continues to listen and send in your questions. It's wonderful to keep this community active.
That's right. If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Mandry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.